Thank you for coming on and talking to me, because this has been amazing. And obviously I've heard so much about you. So this has just been fun to have, obviously, just different perspectives from different people on mental health in general. But I mean, can you it'd be good, obviously, to start off just kind of letting everyone know what you do and kind of explaining on that side before we kind of jump in on the mental health aspect and the topic.
Totally. Well, first off, thanks for having me. I'm a huge fan of what you're doing. I think it's incredible that you create these spaces for people, and it's always so inspiring and humbling to be invited to talk on stuff like this. So excited to be here. My name is Abrahart. I am the CEO and founder of the Mayfair Group. I founded the company in January 2017, and it started as a creative service agency. And I really just wanted to kind of change the way creative service agencies were presented in the industry. And coupled with that, my entire life, since kind of like high school, college, I've struggled with depression and anxiety, a lot of different mental health challenges. And so in 2016, before I started my company, I was navigating a really bad depression. And I had worked in the fashion industry for about 4 or 5 years. I'd worked in-house for brands, done a ton of different stuff in the sales and marketing and PR space. And in 2016, my husband and I moved to Arizona. And it was just like a complete transition for me in life. And that's always when my mental health issues, my depression is heightened, when you're at like a cross point in your life, you're dealing with a career change, a friend group change, like some sort of pivotal moment. That's when your feelings and emotions get really heightened. And a lot of mine is rooted in identity, right? So that's, I think, a big trigger for me is like, if I don't know what I'm doing or where I'm going, then all of this stuff starts to like spiral. So shout out to therapy for teaching me that.
No, it's so true. It's so true.
It's so true. So in 2016, I had like left LA. I'd left my family that lived there. I'd left my job. I was just like in this massive crossroad of like, okay, what am I going to do next? And I was navigating this really bad depression, and I would get on the internet, and 2016 was this like era of everybody pretending to live their best life on social media. It was like the ultra curated feeds. It was like everyone's like on a yacht with their best friends living their best life. And for someone that's navigating mental health illness, that's like the most dangerous space to be. Right. There was nobody talking about the conversations that I felt like needed to be talked about. There was no one creating safe spaces on the internet. And so I had this idea, coupled with the creative agency, which was what my background was in, to create a digital safe space and create a company where we put out content on the internet that felt like it was thought-provoking and empowering and positive messaging versus, the altered reality of Instagram that was 2016. So started the company in January 2017, and we've had just so many chapters since then. It's been insane. We obviously launched products in just 2 years ago. We've only been an e-commerce company for 2 years. But from starting the company as a creative agency, we just started to build this really powerful online community, and we just listened to them. We asked them what they wanted, and they asked for products. They asked for extensions of the Mayfair brand itself. And so in March 8th, 2020, we launched our Shopify site, and that was really where things started to take off for us as our own lifestyle brand.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, no, continue. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's really obviously like, March 8th, 2020, we launched our Shopify site. And, that year we had every single person wearing Mayfair. It was the most insane thing. And people are always just like, you guys have so many celebrities, like, do you pay people? And it was all just organic product seeding. We have an amazing PR manager. Her name's Lauren, but she did a lot of our seeding, and it was just crazy to me. I think the Mayfair journey has just shown me how much people really were looking for these vulnerable experiences and these safe spaces that didn't exist on the internet. It was almost like everybody woke up searching to feel seen and understood. And that's really the human journey, the human experience is like, we just want to feel seen and understood and loved for who we are at our core. And so with Mayfair, we try to create those spaces. We try to create campaigns that speak to these core essential feelings that we feel as human beings, and put out messages that matter. And we work with foundational organizations that we believe in, that are promoting advocacy and research and all these things. So it's just been a really cool journey. And again, I think I'm just blown away by the amount of people that like believed and supported in it, from our community members to people that, wore our products organically. Like, it's just been such an incredible journey. And there's obviously so much more that we want to do in these spaces as well. But it's been just an incredible journey so far.
That's so cool to hear. I literally, it's so inspiring to, first of all, I need to be wearing Mayfair.
I will send you some stuff.
Yes, I definitely need to be doing that. As you were saying that, I'm like, okay, I need to be doing that. But no, I mean, here's the thing. Like, I think you said a really important point to the fact that people want to be seen and understood. And I think it's tough. Like, two things actually you said, and also in pivotal moments, because I think especially for me, speaking on the entertainment business, that's constantly doing this, and so it's hard to find stability in that, which is why, I first started the green room because of that, because it was sort of like, okay, the green room, obviously the backstage sort of idea on what a person really is, because a lot of times, like, as an artist, you have to go in the room and be like, I'm good, or like, or a songwriter, and, be able to not affect other people's energies, especially as a creative person. You're such an empath, and you're able to change someone else's mood. And that's something that nobody wants to feel like you can walk in a room and drain everybody's energy source out. You know what I'm saying? So there's so many aspects of that. And I think to me, it was like, okay, what's a good way to talk to people about what they're actually going through and what their process has been? Because everybody's just so different, but ends up so kind of being the same, So I think for the outside opinion, in terms of like, again, the music space, and to like the fans, for example, to be like, okay, to feel like some sort of like connection and humanity in that, to be like, okay, I'm not alone, basically, which is what you're essentially saying through the work that you're doing, which is amazing. So I think, what I would love to know, I mean, if you're comfortable to say, like, what were the trigger points for you in terms of your depression? Like what, and by the way, feel free to not answer, but I'm always pretty open about my particular experience with anxiety and depression. But what was it that brought you to that point, that sort of, because I mean, listen, it's like everybody does deal with the internet feelings, and in terms of like it's just internet bullying and all that stuff, but you have to have, if you have problems with anxiety and depression before that, it becomes even harder to deal with the internet,
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm totally comfortable speaking on this, obviously, from speaking on it so much. But I'm like, how deep do we want to get into this? I mean, it's like, for me.
Well, no, I mean, deep as we
can go. Okay, I'm like, here comes my trauma. Here we go. But I think for me, it was just like, a lot of it was rooted in identity, and I think, I just put so much into identity. Like, I was a college soccer player when I was growing up, and I'm somebody that, like, by nature, and I think this is how my family just is, again, so much is rooted in family and upbringing too. It's like, we all can have this really deep sense of toxic productivity and identity. And so, I think these like pivotal transformative moments in our life, going from high school to college, like, I had to drop out of college because my depression was so bad. And a lot of that stemmed from the fact that, like, I just didn't really see myself playing soccer past the point that I did. And I put everything into that identity. And I feel like we as human beings, like, one, society likes to label us as one thing, but we like to be known. It's like instinct that we gravitate to things that we're good at. And this is something, like, I now have learned a lot about, is just separating my sense of self and worth from like what I do. And something that I kind of wanted to mention too is, like, if you're struggling with this, and this is something that you also have navigated in your life, something that I've learned is, ask the people around you, or tell the people around you what you want to be congratulated for. Because for me, who's someone who struggles with identity and sense of worth and identity, every single person congratulates me on my job, right? Like, people see what Mayfair does, and it's like, oh my God, this is so amazing. Like, and it's almost like that's the only thing that you get congratulated on. So for somebody that has this issue with identity, I'm thinking like, okay, if I have to keep doing things, I have to keep accomplishing things. If I stop, if I like something happens to Mayfair, like, what am I going to do? Like, what is my sense of worth outside of like what I do? And I think we as human beings, again, gravitate towards that. We want to identify ourselves, and society wants to identify us as like one thing. But the reality is, like, we have so much dichotomy, you know, we are more than anything we will ever do. And we're more than any label that anyone will ever give us, you know, but
Right.
something that I've learned is like to tell people what you want to be congratulated and praised on. So I had done a couple of therapy sessions on this. And after I did it, I went to my friends and my family and I was like, I want you guys to start congratulating me on my presence. I want you guys to start congratulating me on like things that I want to be better at and things I want to be known at. When I create a safe space for someone or I make you feel heard, like congratulate me on these things. Like, of course, my career accomplishments are amazing, but like I want to leave the earth and like be congratulated on things that like mean something, you know what I mean? That like make people feel understood and creating these spaces. So I think that's something that we can do to change the conversation and to move things forward is like, one, ask people what they want to be praised and congratulated for, and then make sure we remember to do those things. And also you can let people know, because for me, I'm rewiring this mentality all the time of like, I'm so much more than what I do. And I'm so much more than my career.
That's really interesting, because like even kind of going back to social media, a lot of time that's what social media is based on, right? So it's like how you look, how you present yourself, what you do. It's exactly what you just said is the opposite from what it actually is. So I like what's actually important, because I was actually talking to a friend the other day and she made a good point to what you're saying. She was like, I have been working on myself a lot and I want to be recognized for being a good friend to somebody, or, you know, just being like reaching out, caring. Because he's like, at the end of the day, like another thing to your point is like when you die, before you die, you don't say like, oh my God, I'm so excited that I got this last deal. Or like, oh my God, I'm so excited that you talk about the people who you love and that love you. And you think about that. You think about the meaningful moments in that sense and what actually makes you tick as a human, right? That's why we're so connected as people to have companionship and family and stuff like that. And like, but like real relationships, not relationships that are fabricated because of something superficial, which I think social media promotes, obviously, right? So there's a lot of people that it's almost like friend fabrication, right? It's not, some of it's not real. It's just like, oh, this person looks cool to be friends with. Yeah. It's all about, and that's what's so hard about social media for somebody that like yourself or like me. I also, you know, I grew up with very bad anxiety and depression as well, with being bullied in high school, junior high school. And I think obviously that ends up weighing on you, and listening to you talk completely contributes to a sense of identity, right? Because if you're bullied, from my perspective, it's like you obviously lose such a massive part of self-worth. So like, again, the first thing that for me, for example, I would have an eating disorder. So then it made me super body conscious. And then it becomes about your control is all about what you can make your body look like, not about like what actually is inside. And I think that was such a fixation for so long that it became like you said, it's like, instead of somebody saying, hey, you're such a nice person, or thank you so much for, you know, whatever that type of thing is going to be that actually gets you somewhere in life. It's like, it'd be like, you know, if somebody said, oh, you look pretty today, or I like your outfit, you're like, oh, that's what I needed to feel good for the day. And that's not healthy. No. You know, like, I've developed, go ahead.
It's feeding the beast like all the time. Right. And I think, first of all, just thank you so much for sharing and being vulnerable. Like, I just love hearing your story as well. And that's so powerful. And again, just gives me so much depth to like the things that you've navigated as well. But it's so many people struggle with these things. And, you know, I think for me, it was like, nobody was talking about that. And I felt like, again, we had to bring those conversations to social media because it did feel like so superficial at the time. Right. And obviously in 2016, way more people are normalizing the conversation now, but it was so bad. And again, I feel like when you do have the tendency to, you know, create, like become, if you have depression, you know, and you struggle with depression, like these things are just triggers, and then it just becomes spirals, right? So like for me, again, sense of worth, sense of identity, value, like there's so many triggers that I've been able to identify over time. But it gets to the point where like in 2016, I didn't leave my bed for months on end. I didn't speak to anyone. I could not get out of bed. I couldn't do anything. I mean, it was the darkest time of my life. I was medicated. I was taking anti-anxiety medicine. I was taking antidepressants. I just couldn't even tell people how bad it was. I wasn't allowed to be alone because I was scared to be at home with my own thoughts by myself because I was afraid of what would happen. Like, it was really dark, you know? And I think people have to process that. And it took me a long time to process that. And for the longest time, I think the hardest thing with mental illness is you identify yourself as the illness that you are. Like, for the longest time, I thought I was just depression, and I thought depression was me. And that's why I struggled to come to terms with the word, because it was so identifying again for me. And I think over time I've learned that, like, your illness or what you struggle with may be a part of you, but it will never define you. And you have the opportunity to, you know, understand that, like, that might be a part of your personality or what you struggle with, but like, it will never define who you are and what you're capable of doing and what you do. So I've had to, again, learn separation. These are all the things that, like, I've navigated, but it was more so just about it not letting it define me. Because for the longest time, it was like, I couldn't even say the word. That's how scared I was of, like, wow, this is something that I have and I can't even come to terms with it. You know, it took me years to even face the fact that it was something I navigated. So
yeah, and like it's hard sometimes with therapy, right? And you're so insightful, and I actually really appreciate a lot of these things that you're saying, because as you're saying them, I'm like, wow, like they're occurring to me that I'm like, wow, I definitely identify myself as being anxious, and I feel it. To some extent, it makes you feel better when you're like, oh, you go into a room and you feel anxious, you immediately have to tell somebody, no, I have anxiety. And then you're like, oh, okay, well, you have anxiety. That's fine. Now I'll give you a break, kind of thing.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think, but like, for me, again, going back to something like this, right? Like for me to have something like the green room felt like a way, not only for other people to talk about their problems, or not problems, let's not call them problems, but issues or things they're going through, was a way for me to also feel comfortable, because I've always, for whatever reason, felt a lot more comfortable in this environment with people that I feel like-minded to, especially that are open and can wear their heart on their sleeve to talk about these things, rather than therapy, because therapy is hard. And like,
so hard.
Yeah, I'm just speaking the truth. Like, I've tried to go to therapy, and I have, but I always end up somehow being afraid of it. And again, it sounds hypocritical having a mental health, you know, show or talking about mental health, but it's not hypocritical, because you have to do whatever is going to work for you and do it on your time. Yeah. Right. So I think, but I do think therapy is really important, but I definitely also think that it's challenging in the sense that it's hard to find the right person, right? That you, and a lot of times I think it takes a lot of discipline, because again, going through it, it's like it takes a long time to get over that hump where you actually start making progress. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I'm saying? Because if you go to therapy like 10 times, let's say, you're not going to solve a lifetime worth of issues. It's just not possible. Yeah. So I think that that's another thing that goes wrong, which is why I wanted to advocate for record labels to be able to have therapists in-house, because I think if there was that aspect of it, and you had your label checking in and making sure, okay, not only do you have to do, you know, radio calls and like, you know, studio times and all the things that you have to do as an artist, but also your therapist is going to automatically be in your schedule this week. Mm-hmm. And I think that's amazing, like only in the sense that like, this is something that I feel like I could benefit from. And I think if that's the case, somebody else is obviously going to benefit in that business. Right. Yeah. But I think that, but it's hard. Like, it's just hard to be able to, and it's to find the discipline to fix yourself. Mm-hmm. And again, going back to the point where you said that you identify yourself with depression or identify yourself with anxiety, for whatever reason, it feels easier to do that, to survive in this life, rather than actually be like, okay, let me solve it. Because that's why I was like, oh my God, it's so smart that she's saying this, because it's like, instead of actually going to fix the problem and being like, you're scared to fix it because you're so like, this is me. Like, it's like saying, okay, I've been having these same hands forever. So it's like, I don't want new hands because I had these hands forever. And it's like, no, I don't. So you're scared to almost let go of the anxiety because you're so used to living in it. Yeah. It's so daunting. And I appreciate you saying this so much, because I think therapy is expensive. Right. It's so daunting. It's the wait list for therapists, if you can afford it, which again, it's incredibly hard to be able to afford it. And the wait lists for therapists, like that's a whole other issue. Is just like, no, let's talk about that. I'm
Yeah,
glad you brought this up. Yeah.
the therapist, like I've been learning about just in general what it takes to become a therapist, and there's just it's so expensive. They have to have all of these licenses. They can only operate in one state. If they want to operate in other states, they have to meet all these other requirements, pay for other licenses. And this is the problem. It's like, it's not like you could just be a therapist and cater to like all states and serve all states. So you just have this huge mounting mental health issue where people are struggling more and more and more. And there's a lack of support and resources for therapists. So it's becoming this just like really big issue. And it's something that, you know, me and Mayfair and the team, we want to work on, hopefully someday getting some legislation passed for therapists to be able to operate in multiple states based on like one license versus having to have 50 licenses and pay for 50 licenses. Because the reality is we need accessibility to resources for people to be able to get help. And it's something we're doing for May too. We're working on a therapy fund that can give people access to get help and stuff. But it's daunting. And I think the biggest thing with mental health is that, you know, no two journeys are similar, and you have to navigate it the best way that you possibly can. Like I couldn't go to therapy for years. Like I didn't even want to like look at that door or like open it, you know what I mean? Because I was still just navigating, coming to terms with it. And I know people that have never gone to therapy and have dealt with it in other ways, like dealt with their come to terms with the things they navigate in other ways. And again, there's no right or wrong way to navigate it. I think the biggest thing too, and something that I thought about when you were speaking that I think is just so beautiful, and it's something that I heard once as someone told me, they were like, creating safe spaces is something that we as individual humans can do for people. And I think it's so beautiful that you said that like you can go into a session and you can just be like, hey, like just a heads up, like I'm feeling anxious today. Like this, you know, I struggle with anxiety. It's something that I navigate. And I think those are the types of conversations that we should normalize, and we should have. Like me going into a boardroom or a meeting saying like, just so you guys know, I'm not feeling 100% today. I just want to preface it. And redefining vulnerability as a strength. First, like when I ventured into this business, I think the most intimidating thing for me was like, how do I be this like female CEO that everybody wants me to be when I have this whole other side of my identity that's like, I have horrible down days. I struggle with depression. I have anxiety and I struggle with all these things. And someone said to me, like, you can inspire a new generation of leadership. You can enter a room however you want to enter the room, and you can set the precedent for like, hey guys, this is going to be a safe space. And like, I just want to let you know, I struggle with these things, and that's okay. Like, we're still going to do this meeting, but here's a heads up of something that I'm navigating today that I want to share with you guys. We don't have to be this, you know, label and identity that society tries to put. Like, if you're a female CEO, you have to be like this person. Like, there's power in redefining that. And I thought it was so beautiful that you said that like, that's how you enter sessions. And I'm sure you make people feel less alone when you do that, because it creates a safe environment for people to feel like seen and heard, you know?
No, definitely. And like that's, and it's back to what you were saying too about people not being able to afford therapy or whatever. It's like, not only like that was one of the reasons why I was saying to have in-house therapy, for it to be like something that's included in that, you know, so artists don't, you know, there's a lot of artists that can't afford it. So it would just naturally be a part of the system. Right. But like the same thing in any job. That's what I was going to also mention. Like, I think to your point, again, it's like the music industry is a little different, or like the entertainment business, because people expect entertainers to be a little bit more like, you know, like off their rocker or whatever. But I'm saying, depending on what you do, your teacher, lawyer, whatever, you show up. And at the end of the day, it doesn't, and it's also very different for men and women, but like for a woman to come in, let's say you're a lawyer and you just have a panic attack all of a sudden, people are going to, oh, she's emotional, she has her period, like whatever they're going to say. If it's a man, it's like all of a sudden you may not get the same business deal because you won't have the same respect in the room or whatever. So it's just like, it's such a hard thing, because mental health is a real illness, and it's something that needs to be taken absolutely seriously. But to your point, it's super hard to be able to normalize it, because it is still frowned upon in that sense, because it signifies weakness, whether or not. So I guess what I also was trying to say in the sense of being able to identify with anxiety or depression, it's different to tell people. Because let's say I was telling you in a totally calm way, like this is what I always say, like I could walk in a room, be chipper, like happy, like, okay guys, but guess what, like I like, or just to be like, I struggle with anxiety and it sucks, and sometimes I get panic attacks, but I'm not saying it like in the moment of the panic attack. People say, oh, of course they feel less alone, of course there's some sort of unity in that. But as soon as you have the panic attack is when it's tough because that's when people sort of still don't necessarily know how to deal with it in the moment.
Yeah.
And I think in that sense is the part that I'm trying to feel like, what is the solution to be able to navigate that actual vulnerability and not thinking that you're going to lose a job, lose an opportunity, lose respect, feel less strong. Like, it's just, those are the things that feel scary because I still deal with it every day. I go into rooms and I have crippling anxiety, and as much as I say it, it still reads in my head so strong that I'm like, even though I believe in all these things and I can say it out loud, it doesn't take away the fact that I feel like it's showing some type of weakness, right? So that's the thing that I'm trying to figure out how to, and maybe it's something we can do together. I don't know. Like, I think.
No, we have such a long way to go. I mean, I think the conversation has moved a little bit, but I still think there's so much stigma around mental health illnesses in general. And I honestly have been trying to learn about the other illnesses, because sometimes we hyper focus on depression and anxiety, but like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, like these are things that are so far behind in terms of stigma and normalizing those types of conversation. And it's like, we just have such a long way to go. But I would love to work with you on this, because I think too, something that I've been learning lately, which is just so wild. So we're obviously a small business. And so we're kind of at the point where we're looking to bring on health benefits for employees and stuff. And it's a whole new road and route for me, because, you know, as a self-funded small business, it's like we before could never afford to like offer benefits for our employees. As we grow, we've been wanting to prioritize these things. But as I'm having these like medical calls with companies that offer health benefits, I'm asking everyone, where the therapy, like where's the therapy, where's the mental health support? Like, I understand if someone gets hurt and they need to go to a hospital, but like we're a company that stands for these things, and like I want to have like therapy and mental health support for my employees. Like, to me, health is like all of it. It's not just physical pain. Like, you get hurt, you go to the doctor. And like, I think, again, just talking about what you mentioned about walking into a session, it's like, it's no big deal if you're like sick or you have the flu or something.
Exactly.
We feel normal to be like, hey guys, I'm not feeling well, I have the flu, whatever. But it's just, it takes that much more courage, which is wrong. Like, we were never educated that these things actually are like something that is like something physically wrong with us. Like, we genuinely are not feeling well. And I think that's what we have to push forward. And again, with the benefits, like I'm pushing to say, like, I don't want to supply just medical benefits to my employees. Like, I want there to be health benefits, like mental health benefits for them as well. Like, if we're going to do the medical thing, like I want there to be like therapy support and ways for them to like get support in that sense, because so many more people struggle with that than like randomly going to a hospital for like, you know, something that happens to them, breaking a bone or whatever. It's just, again, it shows you how far behind we are in the conversation. And we still personally have a long way to go too in terms of support. Like, there's so much more I want to do for my employees as well, but definitely wanting to create those spaces for people. And I think coupled with that, curriculum, like something we're working on with Mayfair is something called Brain Gym, which is working with potentially schools to instill mental health curriculum. Why do we have PE our entire life in school, but we don't have Brain Gym? It's a curriculum.
I love that.
Yes,
that's amazing.
Like, it starts when you're young. Like,
that's so cool.
Grown up in this generation of, we've learned about physical health. We've learned to prioritize our physical health. We know what we need to do if we get hurt. We know how to stretch. We know how to like take care of our bodies, like all these things. We were never taught in school about mental health. No. So we want to kind of change that and hopefully start this thing called Brain Gym, which is basically mental health curriculum that starts in schools and gives younger kids and children access to a curriculum about mental health and your brain, and how to basically exercise your brain, and how to be able to navigate these things and handle these things, to normalize, again, start normalizing that conversation, because all of these things compounded over time has created this place where we are now, where it's like, it's so stigmatized. It's seen as like not a physical injury. It makes people uncomfortable to talk about. So it's like, we have to start from the ground and obviously start building these foundations for it to be more normalized.
Well, also what you were saying too about like bipolar disorder or whatever, it's just like, because it can come across as being like, oh, this person's so like, you know, even in a relationship sense or a friendship sense, it's like you can't really like like define it unless it's, because sometimes it's hard to know if that's the thing. Oh, hold on. Of course, she barks right now. I think that with these things, it's hard to identify in the beginning to know if it's, what's the cause of actually the person, not feeling like on their best. You know what I'm saying? They may be aggressive to you for some reason and you blame it on their personality, but it's really a disorder. You know what I mean?
Totally. I mean, this is probably an unpopular opinion on this. I feel like there's probably a lot of people in the music industry that may listen to this, but when I watched the Kanye documentary and I saw just how bad his bipolar disorder was, it gave me a lot more insight into his world. And again, it's so not normalized. Like, we have to understand that people that struggle with manic and bipolar disorder, like, the things they're navigating, like, we will never be able to relate to as someone that never struggles with that. You know what I mean? So I think, again, it's like people categorize these people as crazy and psychotic. And it's like, those are the exact wrong words that you should be using to describe someone that struggles with bipolar disorder. Because again, you're identifying them as the things that their disorder makes them feel. So that's like calling somebody that's depressed, like, just sad or suicidal or whatever all the time. And it's like, that's not it. Like, your disorder makes you feel things that, like, again, do not define you and not who you are. So it just, to me, it shows that we have a long way to go. And I'm challenging myself personally to learn about those other illnesses, because I've learned a lot about depression and I've learned a lot about anxiety, because those are the problems that I face. But I also want to understand what other people navigate, and however, like, we can help, I can help, like, continue to give exposure to those illnesses as well. Like, I'm 100% down to do, because those illnesses have a long way to go in terms of destigmatizing them.
Well, yeah, and the same thing with being ADD or ADHD or any of those things, because it's like you can be distracted or whatever it is, but people, and also, like, listen, to your point, like, whether or not you can afford therapy, or you may not know, a lot of people don't know that they're diagnosed with these things, right? So it's like, it contributes to learning disabilities in school for kids, like, beyond growing up to being an adult. So it's kind of like, because I mean, that was another example. Like, I was always told, oh, you have a learning disability. And it was just like, well, what is that learning? Like, and it was only later in life that I sort of was understood where that was coming from. And I think, like, and my dad's a psychiatrist, by the way, or he's a psychologist, sorry, he's a professor of psychology. And so that was also, obviously, it's like kind of a blessing and a curse. I mean, it's because, it's your dad. So it's like, obviously he could, but like, they're also, it's when it's personal, it's a little different. But I think it definitely did help me educate myself in terms of in different ways that I think I probably wouldn't have known otherwise. But basically, I'm just saying I agree with you in that sense, because sometimes it's just you. Not only do other people not know you have it, but you don't. And then if you have it, it's like, do you want to disclose that? You know what I mean? So there's a lot of different things that is. But I think, again, going back to this particular thing, like, Jed Foundation is a sponsor of the Green Room, which is awesome. So what we've been able to do is obviously provide therapy to people that are watching and those type of things, which is good. And there's just little steps that you can make, right? It's like, we can't fix the world in one day, but we can definitely make an effort to not only humanize people, destigmatize it in, like, baby steps, but also just provide support for people. And I think we're doing, it's everything's, a work in progress. So
Totally is. No, you're so right. And I think, again, having conversations like this, if you feel comfortable sharing your own personal experience to make people feel less alone. And I think just as everyday humans, we can create safe spaces for people every single day. We can have a conversation or create a space where people can show up as themselves. They don't have to censor themselves. They don't have to be who society's telling them to be. They can literally show up and be themselves. And that's how we can continue to push things forward, is just creating those safe spaces in our everyday life. So yeah, I mean, what you're doing is amazing. And again, I'm just so happy.
Well, what you're doing is amazing. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so blown away by you. And I just feel like I relate to you in so many ways. And it's so, this is exactly why I like to have these conversations, because I think this is what it's supposed to do. And also for the people that are going to watch this, it will do the same thing for them. I'd love to ask, like, so one more thing I want to ask you, just for people that are going to watch this, like, in terms of going back to, like, the social media aspect and with everything that we talked about, like, for somebody that struggles to feel like they have to, like, don't feel adequate enough in any way by whatever the effect social media has on them, like, what are some, like, tools or things that you do or suggest for people that just can't get out of that trap?
I mean, I think social media is something I have such a love-hate relationship with, you know, because I think, again, we all live in our like dichotomy of human beings. I one day will love it, but then on other days I feel an immense sense of like pressure. And I think too, when you're trying to live authentically and you're trying to show up as yourself, there's also just like such an added pressure to, you know, be that way all the time. If I share like a milestone on social media, I'm like, oh, like I have to let people know that I'm also like sad while I'm navigating this.
Yeah, yeah,
This like
exactly.
whole thing. I'm like scared to share an accomplishment, and then I have to share like a crying photo after, you know, it's just like this whole thing. But I don't
That
know.
is,
I think,
but how do you navigate that? That's actually such a good example, because I feel the same way, because you're just like, you don't, in a certain way, like things that you may, and it's weird because it's like things that you may not like, and it's weird because then you try really hard not to be judgmental, but you look at it being like, okay, this doesn't seem like, this seems like a false reality or catfishing or whatever you want to call it, right?
yeah.
But you don't want to judge someone, because that's not the right way to look at it. But at the same time, people do it. So they'll look at it, including us, and I'm sure everyone does it. But you look at it and you're like, oh, I'm doing the same thing. So it makes you a hypocrite, which is why, especially if you are the person that you say that you are and you're representing something to your own brand online, right? So if that's the case, you don't want to be like somebody that's like, okay, this is me, and then do everything opposite. But we do live in a world that surrounds that. So like, I always personally ask myself that question, like how I'm on the same page as you. Like, I'm always like, okay, well, if you post like a picture that you feel like you look good in, it's like, oh, are people going to think I'm showing off? Like, I don't know. It's just like that whole thing. And if that's the case, then like, how do you make it feel like you're just like if I'm like, oh, I'm all about the art, like I'm just relating it to my thing. It's like, I'm all about the art, which I am. I love music. I'm in it for that only. And obviously there's many things that come with it, but that's really the thing that fuels me. And, but then it's like, you're still sort of allowing yourself to be in this other like world of what everyone has to do, where you have to post pictures and where you are, like, oh cool, I just went on this vacation, or I was just at the Grammys, or I went to Coachella, like,
Yeah.
and then you feel the need to do that and submit yourself to it, but it feels kind of weird inside, right? Because if you want to be authentic, but at the same time you almost can't help but submit to the world. So it's like, how do you navigate that?
Yeah. I mean, I take a lot of digital breaks, honestly. I think, you know, as
Right.
someone that is a creative too, like I have to get outside of like the digital world and go and like do things that are creative, even outside of my job. I'm
Right.
sure this is something you navigate too, but when creativity becomes your job, it's like, oh my gosh, what was my outlet has now become something with a deadline. So it's a whole other
Oh
thing
yeah.
that you have to navigate. So I have started like taking up like writing, and I've been like painting, and like there's things that I do. And to me, it's just like I have almost like scheduled time where I call it living in my feminine energy, because I live so much in my masculine energy during the week. So I have like scheduled live in my feminine energy where I literally will not plan things for an entire weekend, and I will just live in that exact moment. Like, I want to go paint, I'll go paint. I want to go to the park, I'll go to the park. I want to go to like a coffee shop and do whatever, I'll do whatever. Like, I don't make a single plan, and I like schedule that for myself so that I can like practice being in my feminine energy without any kind of pressure or a deadline or anything. And during that time, I get off my phone. I literally just am like currently present in what I'm doing. And it's so refreshing to have those moments, especially because when you work in this world too, when you like social media is a part of your job, with Mayfair specifically, it can feel so encapsulating. And I feel like it is. It's like you almost have to either take time out, and if that's hard for you, scheduling time to take time out, like as crazy as it sounds, is like the way that I kind of navigate it. And then I think too, we just have to change the way that we see human beings. Like, I am always trying to congratulate and praise people on their dichotomy, because we have so many layers. Like, you can be successful and you can also be sad. Like, you can
Yeah.
literally be hard and soft. Like, you can be emotional and stable. Like, there's so many things that we want to categorize and pinpoint and label, and we want to identify people as one thing. And I'm just learning to live outside those means, like not put that pressure on myself, live in my duality, congratulate myself on my duality, like acknowledge when I am doing something and then the next day I'm doing something completely different. Like, I give myself like acknowledgement and praise for that. And also other people. Like, I think we again, instead of like when someone does something that's like against the norm of what they would normally do, like go out of your way to be like, hey, I think that was really rad that you like showed that side of yourself, or you did something completely different. Like, acknowledge when people do that, because I do think we have to start empowering this duality that we live in, instead of just trying to constantly micromanage and categorize people as like one thing.
No, I think that's really good. And I think it's about finding a deeper purpose. Like, again, this is actually, as you talk, I always think, I'm like, makes me think. I love that. I like, this is great. But I was just thinking like what social media has made us do is made us feel like we have to document our entire lives, right? So it's like when you go, you can be at the beach for the weekend, you could be getting a coffee, you could go get a drink with a friend, you could go anywhere, be in your car, you're documenting the whole thing. But, and again, each their own, but I think that what I would say is good advice is to feel like some of that can be like, you can have serenity. You don't have to feel like, you have to expose your entire life to the world. You can still have personal moments, things that make you feel good and build you up and like feed your spirit, rather than just constantly having to feed the beast. And I think that's pretty good advice, because I think rather than like saying like, okay, I mean, again, this is, everyone's different, but like, rather than, if you love chocolate cake and you're like, I'm never eating chocolate cake again, it's the same thing of being like, oh, I'm getting off Instagram, I'm not going back, like, or I'm getting off TikTok, whatever it is. It's like, the thing is I think to kind of say, hey, let me slow down for a couple of days, or let me, just enjoy my life and not feel like I have to show people that I enjoyed it, and just let like be able to live in it and feel like what the happiness it brought you in that moment, rather than feeling like, oh, I have to capture it, because if I don't, then I'm going to lose numbers for the day or insight. It's just like, no, just like do it for yourself, because ultimately it will make you better the next day, right? So I think in that sense, that's like, it's kind of like moderation. It's like the, cliche, but I think it applies here,
It's like, just like, again, we like diet, or, I like hate that sense of word, but I'm just saying how people will limit in moderation. It's like, we don't limit how much we consume technology. You know what I mean? We're constantly, and my thing too is like, I used to live so much in response mode. I would wake up and I would like look at my phone right away, and I'd be stressed out about my emails, and I'm like, like it was constant response mode.
Yeah, I've been like that.
It's just horrible. It's like, that's the way we're taught to, that's the obsession, and that's how much we consume technology, is that we wake up and we're immediately consuming and we're immediately responding. And I think my thing that I've learned too is just like, dictate your own days. Like, don't wake up and immediately like live in response mode. Like, you can wake up and literally just like not look at your phone for 45 minutes to an hour, go to the bathroom, say your affirmations, go on a walk. Like, even if it's one of those things, because I feel like it's hard to get people to commit to like doing all of these things, but even if it's one of those things, like changing your day where you immediately don't wake up and look at your phone is going to change your mindset like tenfold. 100%. And then by the time you've said your affirmations and you've done your walk or whatever your morning routine is, then you're in this like really good headspace to like tackle the day. And I felt like that's made such a huge difference for me, because I would immediately wake up stressed out. It was so horrible. Like, I'd just be like, stressed out, response mode. And now I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that to myself, because it was not working for me at all. I was just stressed out all the time. So I wake up now and I have a little routine before I even look at my phone that I do. And then I'm in a really good headspace to tackle anything that comes my way.
It's funny, because I was in that same place like for a lot, like probably like 3 or 4 years, where I felt like, so like if I didn't answer within like 2 minutes, then they were gonna like complain about me or be like, oh, she's not good. And especially like being a girl, and it's just like, oh, like, it's like, it's all even harder. So it's just like, especially in like, not in a, again, I keep bringing it back to my role, but not necessarily as a songwriter, but as an executive. And it's like, you want to feel like you don't have any other, you're just going to be on it. You don't want to, you don't want to really leave any room for error. So like, that was an issue. And like, I think in the past year, especially with COVID, it made me kind of back things up and be like, what are the actual things that I want to be doing? Like, if this is making me miserable, then why would I? And it's not the actual job, or it's not what you're trying to achieve that's making you miserable. It's how you're doing it. So it's like, I just sort of had to be like, what are the things that I like out of this? And what are the things that I can take away that are making it feel like, because it makes it almost feel like the job isn't fun, but it's not about that. It's about how you're doing it, you know?
the pressure you're putting on yourself to immediately like get back to things or respond. And it's like the only person that's putting pressure, like people are not going to care if you respond tomorrow. You know what I mean? It's like we instill a lot of times, and sometimes they do, but like also that's an indication on like, I feel like we can set and change those precedents. But for me, a lot of times it's like self-inflicted pressure where I'm just like, I have to respond to everything at the end of the day. And it's like, no, you don't, you know, but again, we have to kind of rewire our brains and just start doing that. And then we realize like, okay, this obsession with I have to get everything done is a projection that like I'm putting on myself and struggling with. It's not a projection that other people expect of me, you know? So.
No, 100%. Well, I appreciate your time. I literally like love you. So I'd love to hang out or whatever. Like, let's definitely get connected. Next time you're in LA, let's hang out. And yeah, I'm excited to send you this episode. I think it's going to mean a lot to people, and it's like amazing. I love everything that you said. So I really, really appreciate everything. And so
thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm again just so inspired by people that are creating these safe spaces and having these conversations. It's always like something I'd love to be a part of. So incredible what you're doing. I can't wait to hang out. I need to meet your dog in person, obviously.
Oh my God. No. And also I love to be able to do some of this stuff together. So let's definitely get on the same page at some point and just like be able to see what we can create together in this space. Cause I love what you're doing. So it's any way that I can be, you know, of help or anything that like, let's just try to see what we can do.
Perfect. Okay. I'll send you over my phone number and stuff and we'll get connected.
Okay. Thanks, girl.
Thanks so much. Alrighty. Bye.